Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the
powerful entity
Don't worship pagan God.
capable of creating the
Don't
universe
worship pagan God.
would need a middleman.
I'm not the king. I'm not the king. Yeah. I'm not the king.
You would expect something or something as powerful as what you're describing to produce within a split second
The truth and the life.
1,000 books in 1,000 languages for everyone to read and understand.
For humanity.
Right?
Muhammad is
Now,
a bad role
second
model
point.
for humanity.
Can you not touch me?
So,
Okay, thank you.
How do you know
good role model.
this man lived more than a few hundred years ago, who claimed to be the last messenger of God and who received the message through Jibreel or Angel Gabriel? Right?
Muhammad,
How can you be sure that he was not mentally ill? That he was not
about Zainab.
he was not seeking attention? That he was not seeking power?
So,
Yeah.
so you said mentally ill, seeking.
I'm not saying he is.
No, the
I'm
Prophet.
saying
The
it could
Prophet.
be, you don't know.
Yep. How do we know? So this is.
Which has a satanic information. Yeah? Satanic verses. It makes sense to you.
So your first question is, why doesn't an all-powerful God, creator, sends hundreds and thousands of books to all individuals? It's like this. Why doesn't the creator individually give a book to oneself and guide them? Okay?
He will tell you.
Now, we are talking about the wisdom of our creator.
Don't mention Allah's
Why?
name on your face.
Allah
You go and
does
learn
things
before you
in a
mention
certain way.
anybody.
What he does and how he does is his prerogative. For example, you can ask yourself, why didn't God make me a woman? For example, why did look? If somebody asks this question, why didn't God make me a woman? You can ask this, never-ending questions by questioning the action of God, right? And then you will say, why? The simple answer to this question is this: لا يسأل. I will translate. عما يفعل وهم يسألون. I think this is how the ayah goes. He would not be questioned for what he does, what God does, but us will be questioned for what we do, right? Amma yaf'alun, what we do. Yeah, amma yaf'alun. So God creates, does things, actions, because he's wise and he's just, right? He's all knowledgeable, he's just. So when he does these things, why did he create the heavens and the earth in this way and not in another way? Why does water boil 100 degrees in our earth? This is from his wisdom. Why? He could have done other billion possible ways, right? So by questioning this, it doesn't really gives us any means of saying, okay, the other ways may be better and so on. So when it comes to guidance of people, the Creator tells us he sends, or rather he guides people, whether one is grateful or ungrateful. He guides them, shows them the way. He says, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. He shows, I'm translating, just to tell you that I'm not making this up. This is in the Quran. God certainly, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ, he shows you the two parts, whether you are grateful or ungrateful. So individually, on an individual level, God gives us his guidance. God gives us the guidance. But
Shut up.
when you, brother, it's okay. Be patient, brother. Jazakallah khair.
Follow pagan practice.
It's okay. Speaker's corner. We have to learn patience. So I know it's difficult for many of us, but jazakallah khairan. Barakallah. Now, I wasn't rude. I'm sorry, my brother.
No, it's okay.
I'm saying it's important. I'm reminding everyone to be patient. Barakallah fi. I apologize if it came rude to you. I shouldn't have said that, but that's important.
Accept the religion.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Respect the religion. We don't accept
the divine guidance on an individual level comes. God shows. Imagine a
your religion in my Quran.
idol worshipper.
Your religion in my
Could I just ask? I'm
Can
asking people a few questions.
Can I finish our conversation first?
One second. Just really politely. If I owned a house, if you owned a house and I came into your house and I took over your house, would you be happy? No. No? Why is Israel allowed to do this in front of everyone to Palestine and no one's saying anything? That's a simple argument.
Okay, never mind.
Right, that's another
point.
Another debate.
No, that's a fair point. Fair point, but we can
save it
discuss.
for another
It's not
day.
relevant to what we're discussing. It's a fair point, not relevant to discuss. So, God, in His wisdom, He created us not to be forced to believe.
Please don't say that.
Right? Not to be forced to believe. If everyone had sent a book by God
But Allah.
and they're absolutely sure it's from God, there is no choice remaining anymore.
There is no
People
God but
need
Allah.
to be in a particular scope of freedom to use their intellect to arrive at the truth that God sends to prophets and messengers.
It's the same argument you spoke.
No. You can say Christians whatever,
Yeah, it's the same
but this is
argument.
this is an important point because otherwise there is no point of believing or even saying I have freedom of choice or free will, because you will not have freedom of choice. Imagine now God tells you directly here, I am God and worship me, right? You have no choice but to accept that He's your God, your Lord. There's no point saying, oh, I will be good and I won't be bad, because you are not under any choice anymore. You are now forced and compelled to do that. So Creator, in His wisdom, He sent prophets and messengers and gives guidance through them by demonstrating, firstly, that you can actually verify them as prophets and messengers of God by using your intellect that God has asked you to use. He does that, and then once you do and accept it, then you have now passed your test. Because this life is not that we are here for mutual joy and happiness only. Islam doesn't tell you this information. The reason why we are suffering is part of the overall framework in which God tests us. Right? Tests us.
That's what your religion tells you.
That is what we can tell you. It will make sense. If it doesn't make sense to you, we can have another discussion. Yeah. Now, then, when God gives us a test, to fulfill that test using our heart and our mind, our eyes and our intellect and our hearings, to accept the truth, obviously there are people who would not be able to do that, right? Because they want to go against God's message that He has sent. They will try to say, I'm going to worship a tripod, I'm going to worship a man, I'm going to worship a God who has a son, who has a daughter, who has an uncle, who has a brother, and so on and so forth. People will try to continue to do that because of the traditions they may have inherited. So, God sends a book, a revelation, with proof and evidences, so that people can use their ration faculty, the intellect, to verify that this is from God. And this is what I was talking about. I give you certain examples. So, why does God allow us this? Because God wants us also to develop. He didn't just create us in one perfect state. That is not what Islamic epistemology and its beliefs and all these messages in ontology. Islam tells us that we have been created so we can grow intellectually in our maturity. We can strive ourselves to be better and better. We are not like animals, Islam tells us. We are better than the animals, right? Some people can be worse than the animals, like we have seen earlier on, the attitude that people are demonstrating.
Like Muhammad.
Right.
Muhammad
So,
having sex with...
you finish your...
Shut up! Don't say that again.
I haven't finished your second point, but you can talk about the first one.
You finish all your points and then
Okay.
You are more.
Would you mind asking him not to shout on my ears?
Muhammad was the one who had a sex with the daughter-in-law.
This man, he's stupid.
So this Muhammad is the worse than animal. This Muhammad is the worse than animal.
I would be very much obliged if you tell him
cannot be
to
a
stop shouting in my ear so I can listen to you.
He cannot be a
Seriously,
good role.
we're trying to have a conversation.
Sure.
We're trying to have a conversation.
Because I'm answering
He's trying to think.
I'm answering.
He's trying to think and say.
I'm answering this person. Muhammad is a pedophile.
It's not listening.
He had a sex.
So I have to go somewhere else because my ears are hurting.
When she was not menstruating.
Let's go to this side.
Over there.
Sorry, brother.
Muhammad had a sex with that girl.
Do you want to take a seat? It's actually dry, it's clean, okay? Take a seat if you want.
Okay, standing up.
Okay, that's fine. Can someone bring my ladder, yeah? I'll bring all these things. Much good. I hope he doesn't come for us.
Yeah. Okay, so
Right.
carry on. Yeah.
The point is how to know that this
Yeah.
seek attention. Other thing.
He's trying to. He wants power. He wants to attract the crowds.
Yep.
Yeah. And be famous.
Famous, yeah. Famous. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Let's deal with that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about two things here. One is the individual state of being, his mental state, his mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now we know, for example, someone is mentally ill. A mentally ill individual demonstrates in their behavior and interactions that mentally unstable, mentally ill. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Fine. So when the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave us the Quran, in which there are guidance as to how you conduct societal affairs, how you run a country, how you have your economic system and social system, education system, how you conduct relation between other nations and tribes and so on, how you have an outlook in ethics and morality, how you live your life individually and in society. To give you some examples, he tells you, okay, that you need to be truthful, you need to be reliable and trustworthy, you need to be honest in your dealings, in your affairs, in your interactions. Everyone needs to do that. He sets a framework in which the society is raised based on this ethics and normality or morality, and people will be accountable in that society. If people, for example, they rob you, they kill you, they rape you, they plunder you or your wealth, take your land away, your house away, like the other brother was saying earlier on, when someone comes to your house and takes your house away and so on. Now, he gives you reasonable, acceptable laws. For example, he says, if someone kills, you don't say that you give him £20 fine, because we know it doesn't work. Killing, murder does not stop by saying the penalty for murder is $20 or 20 cents or £20. It doesn't work. So what Prophet ﷺ came with from God, laws and regulations, what we call Sharia, the law, in which you, if you are a lawyer, you will understand how even the deterrent aspects makes the human living such a better experience under Islamic law when it's implemented. Today it's not implemented, and that's why we see all this chaos and corruption and all these things, fitna and fasad, all around the world. But when it was implemented, just give you one example, not too long ago, even in Saudi Arabia, right, which is the monarchy today, right, people, when the time of prayer came, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, you know what they did? Time for prayer came, we need to go to the mosque, the masjid. They will leave their shops, it could be a shop selling gold and jewelry. They didn't need to lock it under lock and key. Put a cloth over it, open. No one needs to stay there. They will go and pray and come back with this confidence in their heart and mind that no one is going to steal. How did it transform a society of pagans who were burying their daughters alive because they were born as a daughter. Islam came and transformed them into this state of being. So Islam gives us all of these laws and regulations and teaching. This does not reflect someone who is mentally unstable. So this is my point there briefly. There's no point going into too details. If you want to question and criticize it, I can go into detail. Second thing about motives. Now, if someone is not a messenger of God, an imposter, a fraudster, a fake individual, that person needs a motive. Why is that person claiming to be a prophet of God? Is that claim going to give him some credibility, authority, power to do what he's trying to do? That's people's motives. Maybe he wants to get famous, as you said. Do you know what people did at that time? When he was calling the people to worship none but God and abandon the worship of the creation, abandon worshipping idols that you craft with your own self. When he asked people to worship God, at one point they said, you know what? Stop calling us to this one God. Tell us what you want. If you want to be the king, we will make you our king. If you want wealth, just tell us what we want. We will make you the richest among us. If you want women, just name them. You can have any woman that you want. Fame, power, authority, fulfillment of desires. You can have all of this materialistic need fulfilled, but stop calling to worship one God. Do you know what he said? Because if he was an imposter, he has succeeded. He has succeeded in his plan. Now he can be a king and he can control the people. Now he can be the richest person and he can control the people in power and authority and so on and so forth.
He's dead.
But he said, in another occasion, if you gave the sun on one of my hands, on the right, for example, and the moon on the other, I would not stop this call until God prevents me from doing so. So a sign of sincerity and the absence of these false materialistic motives is demonstrated. This is about fame, power, and so on. Name for himself. He was already famous. He was known as Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy, the reliable. People did not know him other than being someone truthful, trustworthy, all his life. He was famous to the point that this is how they arbitrated their matters with him. So at one point they wanted to rebuild the Kaaba, in which was the stone that they need to place. Tribal disunity started growing. I want to place this. Our tribe should place this stone on that corner of the wall. Another tribe says, no, it should be our responsibility. We are more noble than you. I'm paraphrasing the history. They started this disunity and problems within themselves. And they then eventually said, you know what, this is not how we can resolve. It's going to amount to a war. Like over a camel, we've been to war for 40 years. This, who knows what's going to happen to our nation with our tribal, disunity because of that. They said, but we know someone who can arbitrate and solve the problem. They found Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and they were happy to make him the arbitrator, right? So he was already a famous individual. He was already known to him. So it wasn't about making a name for himself. Attention and power, he already had the attention. Power, it was offered to him, but he rejected. How did he live when he had the power? That's another test for a fake individual. If someone is fake and imposter and fraud, when they have the power, you will see in their life, in their actions, the demonstration of someone's bit of fraud. They will live a life of luxury. Living in a palace like this, with all they need, right? Food and wealth and clothing, whatever, you name it. People will be like on his feet, kissing his feet and worshipping him, like some people used to do with kings and monarchs and so on, right? They will be humbling down to him. But he even said to his people, when he was coming along, right? And he was, the people were sitting, his companions, and they stood up. He says, no. You don't need to rise up for me. He stopped them from even rising up. Look what we do in our cultures. When a teacher comes, we stand up. When something happens, we stand up. In the courts, for example. Prophet ﷺ said, no, you can't elevate him like this, right? So when he passes away, don't make his tomb a place of worship. That is what we are demonstrating. So how did he live his life? Okay. Having all the power to control 1/3, or even at that time, a lot. How did he live his life? When he died, we can see. When he passed away, he left his possessions. Now we can see how much heavy bolts of the banks that you need for the world to transfer his wealth to there, right? He had a shield from someone else that was given to him, which he was holding, because he was a trustworthy individual that needs to be returned. He had a jar in which there was water. He had a bed made of these date palm leaves and a stone brick, a brick for his pillow. And some utensils were maybe some dates, something left. That was his possession. Now an individual who is a fraudster, a fake, wants fame and glory and power and authority, living a life like this and leaving these possessions as inheritance, this doesn't demonstrate that he was someone who had this ulterior materialistic motive.
There are loads of people who've left their position after they died and they're not prophets.
Let's understand one point.
Yeah, okay.
Does this sound to you someone who has a materialistic motive?
You haven't explained. You've missed a few bits.
Let's talk about
in the biography.
No. Let's talk about all these things. When it comes to power, fame, authority, making a name of himself, seeking attention, and so on and so forth. Besides being mentally unstable and producing a Quran, no one can match, whether with its laws or its sciences. Imagine if this was the justification for progress in scientific knowledge, we should induce people to be mentally ill. Because what Quran has brought from its sciences and teachings, which you think could be a mentally ill person's product, we need to make every scientist mentally ill. Because that is the level of what the Quran has brought to the world sphere. So, does it sound to you that he was after power?
Right, can I respond?
Yep.
Yeah, from the beginning, and then I move on to the biography that you gave of the Prophet Muhammad.
Go ahead.
Right. Now, first of all, if it's important for the whole of mankind to recognize the existence of a supreme being who has created everything in the universe, why make the message so obscure?
Message is not obscure.
It is obscure.
No.
Because it's coming from. It's not prime. It's not the
Okay, can I stop you for 1 second? Just to talk about. Just to clarify that point. The Quran says this is book from God. Point number 1. So now you know where it's coming from, and this here tells you, worship me and none else. And here is the evidence is from me. So it gives you the evidences. How is this obscure?
So there's no evidence. It's
Sorry. One moment. I will entertain all your criticisms. When you say there is no evidence,
there is no evidence.
No. When you say there's no evidence,
the word of one man.
Please.
It's the word of
What's your
one
name,
man.
my friend? What's your name?
My name is Gilles.
Gilles. I'm Mansur. Gilles.
Yeah.
When you are already saying there's no evidence, when even the very talk that I gave earlier on, I was offering evidence. So you can't say there's no evidence. To you, what you can say is, I have not heard of convincing evidence.
No.
Now, I can say the only evidence that convinced me is when God tells me personally. But is this really an objective way of verifying God exists? Is this an evidence for everyone? No, because that may be that you have made up something of a criteria for your own self, knowing that no evidence on earth, even if, let me tell you what the Quran says. If the unbelievers saw there were stairs going up the heaven, the dead spoke, you know what? What people will say? You will not say, now I accept the evidence. They will say, we are bewitched. We are deluded. This is an illusion or a delusion. We have been under the influence of magic. There is nothing in an insincere, arrogant individual when it comes to evidence, because no evidence will be convincing to them. But a person who is sincere, wanting to know the truth, they can see the evidence. When the people saw Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for the 40 years of their life, and when he said, I'm a messenger of God, sufficient for them as an evidence he was a messenger. They didn't need to hear anything about the science that I was talking about earlier. Not needed, it was unnecessary. Why? Because people's level of evidence is something that they know what is convincing for them. You may have this ultra demand for evidence because you know in your heart you don't want to accept any evidence. If I were to ask you, I'm going to ask you directly. Name me 2 examples of evidence that will convince you without a shadow of doubt that God exists. Number 1.
Manifestation would be one.
Manifestation
would be one.
Manifestation.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Yeah. Able to talk and that.
Able to talk.
Yeah.
God able
Directly
to talk.
To everybody.
Directly. Hang on.
To everybody.
Hang on.
To everybody. Not.
If you saw in the sky someone like says, I am God. You saw it. We all saw it. And it says, I am the creator of the heavens and the earth. If God were to manifest himself here and told you that, so now you've ticked the box, you'd accept him?
I'm not sure.
See, oh wait, we stop there.
Now let me finish.
Okay, finish.
Because in order to assess the truth, you have to be rigorous. That's why being a scientist is a very difficult job. You have to. You have to search, and sometimes you have to go back onto your assumption. Yeah. And you should be
your assumption of manifestation.
No, you should be humble enough. To accept that maybe what you believe in might not be true.
We are not discussing that. We are discussing what would convince you, manifestation. Now, what picture do you have of God? That when he manifests, or when it manifests, when God manifests...
It never happened anyway.
One second, please, please. Now, it's your chance to demonstrate that you know what you're asking for. So, tell me, what are you expecting of God that he would manifest as what?
You're making the claim.
No, I'm not making the claim.
No,
I have reversed the table. I have said, what would convince you without a shadow of doubt? Why did I make that qualifier? Without a shadow of doubt means unquestionably you will be convinced. You said, I am not sure. That means you were not convinced what you asked for. So let me ask you again. I'm going to probe on this. Number 1, manifestation. What are you expecting to God to manifest that you are absolutely convinced that he is God?
A manifestation has to be assessed thoroughly. So I can't give you a straight answer straight away.
I'm listening. I'm going to listen. Tell me, what are the manifestations that you're expecting so I can tick your boxes?
Let's use a phenomenon. You know, in the past, when people saw a rainbow in the sky, they thought it was a God creating it, until the scientists understood refractions, the work of prism, and how...
I hope you don't mind, I'm just sitting there, I'm a bit tired.
That's okay.
Apologies. You're more than welcome to sit beside me.
Okay. They understood how light was composed. Then, from then on, they can ascertain that's what the rainbow is made of. Now, you're asking me if I see something extraordinary.
What do you mean by extraordinary?
Right, something we've never seen before.
Like what?
Yeah.
Because
let me tell you.
Microphones with you. Oh, microphones switched up. Beg your pardon. Sorry.
Let me tell you something absolutely silly. Like a big hand.
It's with me.
A big hand coming from the sky.
Big hands, manifesting big hands. No. I'm going to take anything that you say, and I'm going to test this. We're going to test this manifestation.
Yeah. So
when you say manifestation, tell me.
You know, it could take a long time to really assess whether what's happening is happening for real.
Take your time.
Yeah.
You saw a hand coming through.
Yeah.
So how are you going to be convinced it's God?
I may never be convinced because
then what you're asking for is not convincing.
Yeah.
So that means your demand that you ask is not convincing to begin with.
Yeah.
Try again.
Yeah. What I'm saying.
Shall we go to number two?
Yeah.
No. Please, please.
What I'm saying.
What was the name again?
Gio. Yeah.
Gio.
What I'm saying.
When you are asking,
don't take things as true from someone from the words of someone you've never met who died hundreds of years ago.
I am giving all that you want in terms of convincing you that there is a creator. So I want to hear from you, from your heart and your mind and intellect and your scientific methodology or otherwise, right? What would convince you that that's God? When you came with the example of manifestation, you will never be convinced, according to what you've just said. So that means what you demand, if you have an hypothesis in science and says, look, you'll never be able to falsify it, that is not a good hypothesis. You will reject that because it's not testable, it's not provable. So what you've asked for,
proving something.
No, please. What you're asking for is not that it's going to provide you evidence of certainty in your heart and your mind from your own example. So I have to cross this out. It is not what will convince you. Number two, able to talk directly. If you hear someone saying, I am God, we all hear it, you will be convinced?
Okay, well, let's talk then.
No. Would you be convinced? It's God.
Right. I ask questions and I wait for him to carry on.
And okay. You ask question, he answers it.
He's given me a sentence. I'm waiting for paragraphs and probably a book.
No. He tells you everything that you want. He answers you all of it. Answers everything.
Right.
Would you be convinced?
Well, that's purely hypothetical.
Your demand is hypothetical too, so it's not a problem.
No. We're in the world of fiction here. We can make up anything.
Options. We are in the world of how do we understand the creator exists. So the creator tells you and answers all your questions. You believe?
It's purely hypothetical.
No. You demand evidence to convince you without a question of doubt. If this happens, would you be convinced?
I'll ask for more and more and more and more until.
So at what point do you think you'll be convinced? You're not sure?
Yeah, because when you start...
Would you be sure?
No, listen. When you start an investigation, you never know how far it's going to go and when it will finish, and when you have all the elements. That's why, even in a court of law... even in a court of law, it's very difficult to that somebody is guilty. Innocent.
But for you to be convinced without a shadow of doubt. So at what point you will say, Halas, now I'm convinced. Tell me, at what point? How many questions? Science, you have to put a number.
And it's not only asking so
I just told you, you're asking something which is going to happen. Why? But God did not create you for the whole world to be forcibly believing in Him. So you're asking, saying, oh, God, can you show yourself? And you see that bottle in there with that jar, and you've got the lid behind you. Say, are you powerful enough to go into it? And you close it, you can't come out? You can't have that. I'm saying, what you're demanding, ask yourself. It is unconvincing in the first place.
Right. And so
that demonstrates something about your own self. Perhaps you need to reflect more, have some self-introspection and saying, why am I being this hyper-skeptic about God? When I see the evidence, for example, have you ever felt, and you said, oh, God help me, ever in your life?
In the past, when I was a believer.
When you were a believer?
Yeah, when I was.
Okay, so what did make you disbelieve in Him? There must be some either emotional attachments, something that happened to you emotionally, or purely intellectually and rationally, or a combination of both.
Because the whole story, I was brought up Catholic. Yeah. So the whole story from the Bible just didn't make any sense. It was not true to life. Okay.
Yeah. Like some examples.
The Virgin Mary, for instance, that's not true to life.
There are many species of the animals gives birth to the same species from the same species. You heard about this already. Yeah. So I don't see how.
Does it happen in humans?
No, it happens in nature. So you have clear precedent in nature, and then you can't say, oh, just because I haven't seen and witnessed in humans, it means it's not true and it's just a fable. It doesn't follow like that. This is really not very, being reasonable. If there was nothing of this sort that we have an example to compare with, that's something to say, look, this is like magic. Right. But what we have seen is how life can come to be, like with examples. please.
I will be closer to being convinced by a like that, rather than the ranting of somebody who lived 600 years ago or more. Right?
No, when I say ranting, you see, look, the language you're using, it's something that's offending to you, perhaps.
Yes, right.
So, of course, very offensive word, but you know, if you were talking about Prophet Muhammad, I would like to know why this negative feelings.
Okay, can we move on to the biography of the Prophet?
Yeah, we can. So, firstly, we need to just wrap up this argument. When you talk about the Quran and Islam is a product of a mentally ill person, and he has these ulterior motives to be famous, to be a king, to be a powerful authority. Now, the examples I have given you, offered to you, demonstrates otherwise. And you said you're going to talk about this, but please do, so we can move. But at least we haven't found anything in his life which demonstrate that he was an imposter, a fake, a fraudster.
Have you read the Sahih al-Bukhari?
Many parts of it, yeah.
Have you read the part in book 7?
Oh, I don't know.
62.
Just tell me the reference and I can...
Narration of Aisha.
Okay.
The Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6. He consummated the marriage when she was 9. Aisha continued to live with the Prophet until he died 10 years later.
Sure.
Right. So.
Yeah, I'm aware of this hadith.
Yeah. Okay. So.
About marrying.
Yeah. You believe that's
young.
The words are true because it's
historically true.
Sahih means authentic.
No, you don't have to tell me. Historically, this is what is accurate for us.
This is what it says. This is what's written.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it? Would you have a friend who has had sex with a 9-year-old little girl?
So,
and secondly, do you have any?
Let me write this down.
Do you have any compassion with little Aisha, who had non-consensual sex with somebody in his 50s?
Sorry, I haven't finished my first question.
Yeah.
Would I have a friend, having non-consensual sex with a 9-year-old?
A 9-year-old little girl.
And the second question?
What did you write?
Would I have a friend who wants to have sex with a 9-year-old? Would I be happy with that?
Yeah. A friend being in his 50s.
Okay. Yeah. And this friend is in his 50s.
Right.
Okay.
So this is Prophet Muhammad. There are other passages in the Sahih al-Bukhari.
So you're thinking that this demonstrates God doesn't exist?
No. It demonstrates that the claimant doesn't have a moral compass.
Oh, moral compass.
Yeah.
We're talking about moral compass.
Yeah.
What is the moral compass based on? Can I first establish that and then we can talk about it? So he hasn't got. Prophet has no moral compass. Prophet has no moral compass. So let's establish.
Is it right or wrong?
Oh, right or wrong. Even talking about right, wrong.
Is it right or wrong to force a 9-year-old little girl to
force?
Have sex?
Wow, look at this claim.
A 9-year-old girl cannot decide if she wants consensual sex.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about holistically first. What is our moral compass based on? That we are judging something is immoral. Because your question is about immorality. This is an immoral behavior. So let's understand what is the yardstick that we're judging against.
In this country, it's the law of the land.
So if this country, yardstick, and you're going to stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Yardstick is the law of the land.
Yeah.
So if the law of the land says you can marry an 8-year-old and have sexual relationship, you'd have no problem with that.
Anything below.
Wait. So, remember, the yardstick from your own definition, law of the land. So if we have now France from tomorrow saying people can marry at the age of 8 and have sexual relationships, and you are a French person and you live in France, you're a French national. According to the criteria, the yardstick of morality, the moral compass, you would have no problem with that, would you?
You're making a fallacious argument.
One second. Law of the land determines what is moral. That's what you said.
Yeah, but that's not...
One moment, please.
Yeah.
Let's go step by step. Are you saying the law of the land is what determines what is moral and what is immoral? Good.
In this country?
If England says it's okay to marry a 7-year-old and have intimate relationship, passes a law. So according to you, it is moral.
No, it becomes just as bad. It becomes just as bad.
I mean, it's very difficult for me to continue this conversation if you backtrack. Excuse me,
we're using
Jill. If you backtrack from the very argument you said, can I finish this point? You said the arbitration here is done by the law of the land. Whatever the law of the land decides is moral behavior, is morally acceptable. If England decides marrying someone, or not even marrying, having sexual relations with a 9-year-old is according to the criteria that said, it's morally acceptable. Are you now going to backtrack that?
What you're doing, this is what's known as a straw man.
I'm not doing straw manning it.
Straw man argument.
I'm challenging your yardstick.
Straw man argument.
How is it straw man?
Yeah.
So how is it straw man?
You're portraying a situation that does not exist. There has never been laws enacted of that nature.
There has been. Don't you know English history?
In the UK,
Henry VIII, he married someone very young. But maybe wait.
21st century.
Oh, listen.
This is the 21st.
So now here are the problems that I'm finding, Gio, speaking to you. With all due respect, please forgive me if you find them offensive. You said there is no historical precedent. And now, when we talk about history and precedents, you can find yourself knowing that in history it exists, like Henry VIII, all the other English laws, even before, and now realizing that it goes against your criteria of morality, acceptable behavior, you confine to, not in the 21st century, you will say, morality of today, Sunday, the 18th of July, 2021. And you keep on doing that, just like you will keep on doing when evidence after evidence will be provided, you will say, no, it's not convincing. So now, let me ask you once again for the final matter on the subject of morality, because I do not have even any reason to continue any further demonstrating from Sahih Bukhari how it's acceptable or not, by even discussing the moral arbitration, or the yardstick or the moral compass, is enough and sufficient to dismiss your argument at hand. Let me ask you again. If a country decides for itself, law of the land, having sexual relationship with a 9-year-old is morally acceptable, is this morally acceptable?
I would go against it.
Then it wasn't the law of the land then. Because the law of the land is, it's okay. So you have now, you know very well, if you understood logic, you've moved your goalpost. It's called moving the goalpost one by one. I apologize because you know your argument doesn't work, and you feel like, how am I going to counter this and counter that? Be sincere and ask yourself, actually this man has some sense, it seems reasonable. If it was the law of the land which says this, but I'm not accepting it, even though I put this forward. So it is not the law of the land which is the moral compass. Can you think of anything else? Just to broaden your perspective, maybe something else is what you're after, which makes things moral.
The human rights.
What are the human rights?
Charter.
When you say human rights charter, who made them? Fallible human beings. And you saying they know everything, what is good for us and bad for us? Hitler knew what is good and bad for his people, didn't he?
So you're perfectly okay?
I'm not okay with Hitler.
No. So you're
neither am I okay with people saying these are the human rights.
Yeah. You see, you're perfectly okay for somebody to have sex with another.
No.
You're not.
Listen.
You're not.
Don't take what I'm saying. I am not okay with your moral compass. That's what I'm discussing. I am not discussing Sahih Hadith in Bukhari about the marriage of Aisha radiallahu anha when she was 6 and so on. I'm not discussing that yet. Yeah. I am saying I don't even need to. I'm only discussing your presuppositions of moral compass. Let's talk about the moral compass. It was the law of the land. Even the law of the land accepted. You will just... Meaning it was never for you the law of the land. Human rights. If some people this and that, you know what? 100 years ago, same human beings were to hang some people here. You know what? Wait, Tyburn.
I know that.
We need to know the history. Why they used to hang them? What was the punishment of homosexuality in this country?
Probably death.
Death. So human beings decided death, which was right and which was human wrong. So you are going to tell me human beings in 21st century can decide what is right and what is wrong. I don't buy it. It's not convincing at all. I'm sorry.
So
it's not convincing to you either. Shouldn't be. Because you know by historical precedents, human beings were quite happy in offering life as these are virtuous things. That's the right thing to do. Human rights and human wrongs can change, shift, reverse, depending on time and space, and so that cannot be an arbitrator, cannot be the yardstick. So you need to, my friend, you to start reflecting on what indeed is the yardstick, what indeed should be the moral compass. Something that, let me help you with some examples, maybe you can reflect on it. It needs to be objective. Law of the land is subjective. A land can decide one law, another law can decide another law. Subjective. So first criteria of a moral compass needs to be objective. There will be nothing that you can bring from human experience, an objective moral compass, unless it's from God. I can give you the argument of contingency and so on to demonstrate that to you. Morality can only be anchored in the one and only creator who is perfectly independent and absolute being. It cannot be based on a contingent being.
That's your belief system.
Not a belief system.
That's your belief system.
No, it's not my belief. It's my rational understanding, and I can go through the rational process to share with you how rationally these things are. So I don't need to just tell you I believe in X and Y and Z. So far, for the last 2 hours or more, I have not only given the reason, not stated my belief, I have given reasons for my belief. Reasons which are intellectual, rational, philosophical. They are grounded in solid foundation. If you disagree with them, that's up to you. I mean, no one can take this away from you. Even at the end of the day, you disagree. But all we can say is, my friend, please.
So you're perfectly
reflect.
Perfectly okay for somebody to have sex with a 9-year-old girl.
When did I say that?
You defended.
I have only questioned your basis of morality.
Yeah.
I have not defended or went against anything. I have not given my understanding of whether this is acceptable or not acceptable. Neither.
So you sit on the fence?
No, I don't sit on the fence.
Yes, you are.
No, I don't. Why are you imposing your words on mine? I am telling you that I have not given you any of them, whether it's this or that. Instead, what I have done to you is open up for you an avenue to reflect further, in which what is our morality based or anchored in, or should be anchored in. For example, you would be perfectly happy if man having sex with man, right?
I don't care.
It's not about care. Would you say it's morally acceptable?
It's not doing me any harm.
I don't say about what's doing to you. Let me ask again. Are you going to say it is morally acceptable for man to have sex with man?
I would say so. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you see, even man having sex through the rectum of another man, that's what happens, right? Isn't it? Right. Hang on. Yeah. That's what happens. You're saying it is morally acceptable. May I ask you why?
Because it's happening between two consensual adult human beings.
Okay, got you there. Now we're going somewhere.
Right.
Sorry. Stop there.
Right.
We're going somewhere, Joe?
No.
So it's about adults plus consents. Yeah. So morality is anchored in, independent of nation states, as long as two adults, they consent to their behavior, it's morally acceptable.
Yeah.
What's another thing?
Not harming anyone else.
And no harm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Not harming anyone else.
Excellent. No harm.
Yeah.
So now let's test this. If your son wants to have, if your son who is, when is someone an adult? Let's define that first of all. 18?
Yeah.
18.
18.
Good.
Yeah.
Over 18.
Come of age 18.
18.
Yeah.
If your 20-year-old son, 20-year-old son wants to have sexual relationship with your wife, meaning his mother, consensually and using condoms. According to your logic, they're adults, tick a box. Consents, tick a box. No harm, tick a box.
Yeah.
It's okay, morally acceptable.
It will hurt me. I'll be hurt.
No.
Yeah.
So harm meaning what? So now you're going to redefine what is harm. So let's go back again then, because we haven't finished what we mean by harm.
Yeah.
So we have to come back to the example. When you say there's no harm, what do you mean by harm? When, for example, believing people see homosexual activity, it harms them emotionally, saying, how can they kind of acts? But because they are legally, wait 1 second, because if it's legally protected, otherwise you'll be a homophobic, they might kill it. That's what happens in a believing community. But it harms them emotionally, because they are concerned about how much harm their children will have by this kind of belief system and seeing these kind of things, right? To a believer, that's a perfect act, a sin in the sight of God. Sin. So they are really, really harmed. So according to harm criteria, this is morally unacceptable. Part of the criteria is harm. Believing people, theists, are harmed. This kind of acts. So you're saying, according to this criteria of harm, homosexuality is not morally acceptable.
It doesn't fall into the framework of the law.
Wait. Forget about law. We passed the law of the land. We already discarded the law of the land. It has nothing to do with it. So now we're talking about harm. So now if people are harmed, believing people who believe in God and consider this as a sin, look, we have nothing against homosexual people. They have inclinations. But what we are saying is, God asked you to curb your inclinations and don't act it out. If you act it out, you're being sinful. In a law, a country in a law which has laws implemented, laws of God, they will be punished. But it's not on the people to take their own hands and punish these individuals. No. Right? God considers it a sin and there's a punishment for this sin. No right for people to be homophobic, right? Because people have many feelings. Some people want to have sex with their tree, whatever, right? But it doesn't mean that you have, the feeling that he's not a decent human being, not a human being. Still a human being, but they have these inclinations. Whatever reasons they have these inclinations. So according to harm principle, homosexuality is not moral because it's a harm. According to your definition, emotional harm.
I never said that.
So what do you mean by harm then? When your 20-year-old son and your wife wants to have sexual relationship within condoms, you're saying you'll be harmed. In what way you'll be harmed?
Yeah. I'll give you an example of harm, right? So you have,
in this example, how will you be harmed?
An example. If someone rapes you.
No, stop.
If someone,
sorry. Your son, 20 years old, wants to have sex with your wife, his mother.
Yeah, and they all.
I apologize for this example, right? They're consenting, and they're going to use contraception. You said you're going to be harmed. In what way are you going to be harmed? Let's draw this list of harms that you're going to be facing.
Because if I love my wife and someone in any
they love each other as well. They love you.
No.
Some people can love multiple people.
We're talking about emotions. It's a natural emotion to be. But
they love each other too as well.
No.
So your wife loves you, and she sexually loves your son as well, and they love each other. So you might
have the choice if I want to stay with her or not.
No. When you say harm, what is the harm again? I need to know what the harm is about, so we can regulate and make certain understanding of this is what is harm, and then we'll use that principle to make things moral or immoral. That's what you're saying. Morality is anchored in two adults having consents and no harm. That's more acceptable. So I give you an example, and we are only left with harm bit. You will be emotionally harmed because you feel some kind of betrayal, but she says, I love you still.
But if I have the choice to let it go, and that's what.
What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it morally? What's morally wrong? They're consenting, two adults.
Yeah.
So the wrong bit is harm bit. Is that what you're saying? There's something wrong is about harm. What makes it wrong is the harm that is causing you, isn't it? What makes it wrong?
Is it making it wrong?
So it's not wrong. Is it wrong? I'm asking you now. Is it wrong? Is it morally wrong?
We're talking about a hypothetical. Someone would do something. Yeah.
Real example, not hypothetical.
Yeah.
I am now reversing the table back to you for you to reflect on these, criteria for accepting morality and questioning the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
So we need to have a moral compass. So why is it wrong?
That he has sex with my wife.
Yeah. Why is it wrong? What's wrong about it? Okay, we're going to finish this soon, inshallah.
In fact, there is nothing wrong.
Okay, fine. So there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Let's leave it to that because we have to go. Now, may I continue this conversation later because we've been talking enough a long time. But a few points that I would like you to engage further with you again, if we meet you, Joe, is on the character of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we touched upon the morality.
There's more. There's more.
Yeah, we will talk about it, but not today because we have a long discussion. I want to make it short. So we're going to wrap this up by saying, in the near future, we'll sit again, maybe here, and we'll talk about. So we will establish the moral anchorage, in fact, what the moral or morality is anchored upon, or the yardstick, the moral compass. Once we agree on this, then we're going to apply that moral standard and see whether, based on this, his actions were moral or not. Because unless you and I know what is moral or immoral, what is acceptable or not, it is wrong to judge someone. Do you not agree? It is wrong to say this is wrong when we don't even know what makes it right or what makes it wrong. Yeah? So let's leave it to that. I appreciate we had a long discussion, and we had a very very interesting discussion on various topics. So we hope that we meet again and we talk.
There's more.
That's what I'm saying. We talk again. We talk again, and we brush this and then come to a conclusion whether indeed Islam is true, indeed if God exists or not.
And whether Islam is moral or not.
Absolutely. That's the purpose, the reason of discussion. So thank you very much for having a discussion with me, and you take care and all the best. And if I have offended you in any way by using this example, I apologize.
It takes a lot.
I apologize. Okay?
And stay well clear of 9-year-old.
You see, that's a very cheap shot because look, I wanted to end it in a nice way without being condescending and so on. Let's leave it to that. Until we meet again, take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.